For my take on the arcade game Emulator project, I decided to try my hand at some Dig Dug. Dig Dug is a game developed by Namco and released to arcades in 1982. In Japan, Namco also published this game, but in America publishing rights were given to Atari. Dig Dug is a game that has been ported to a plethora of different systems, with the most recent being the iPhone's 2009 version titled Dig Dug Remix. Now, I've played Dig Dug before, and many games from that era, so the graphics didn't necessarily surprise me in any way. The graphics could be described as primitive, especially when compared to many of the games released even within the past 20 years, but the sprite work truly does hold some charm even to this day. All of the sprites within the game are designed in such a way that it would be extraordinarily hard for the players to confuse multiple different elements from each other. For example, the two enemy types presented are completely different shapes and colors, with Puka being a red circle with a little bit of yellow trim, and Fygar being a green dinosaur with a little bit of red trim. The player sprite also follows this pattern by being a humanoid whose color scheme consists completely of white, which is his suit, and blue, which is what seems to be his skin. There's also a little bit of red when he brings out his pump. The first thing I noticed when I started playing was the way in which Namco decided to handle the music. The main theme can only be heard while the player is actively moving, and cuts to silence when the player stops movement. I think this is a fun addition that incentivizes players to actively play the game, and acts as a little reminder that movement is encouraged. I can't think of many modern games which utilize this technique, for it is already ingrained in the 21st century game player's mind that the ability to move exists and is encouraged. The closest relative to this concept I can think of can be found in Devil May Cry 5, where instruments are added to the backing track as you perform better within the game. The situation that the game depicts is very simple in nature, with very little background given to the player. Based on the visuals of the game, the player knows that they are underground and they are tasked with the destruction of various creatures, but that's really it. This brand of simplicity can be found in many arcade games produced around the time. The lack of story is heavily contrasted by games created in the 21st century, where oftentimes the story in which the game tells is one of the main incentives to even play the game in the first place. The reason why someone would play Dig Dug is simple, and that is to get a high score. The player can earn points in various ways, such as defeating the enemies, which will give you varying point values depending on the monster and how well you actually blow it up, and even simply moving your character will slowly accumulate the player points. The idea of games as competition dates back to pre-video games, which we learned about previously in this course, and can be found in modern games within genres such as fighting games and battle royale. Overall, I enjoyed doing this little retrospective on Dig Dug. It is interesting to see the similarities that can be found between it and the games before it, as well as the games which came much later after it. I think the game still holds up, and I'd have to credit that to the pure simplicity of the game overall.